Alright, so today's video we're reviewing The Post, the Steven Spielberg led movie cast with Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks, about the Pentagon Papers and the Washington Post. It just wide release across the country today or Thursday, and it's been in limited release. Doing a lot of positive big movie dollars in limited release. It's interesting. I'm interested to see how it's going to do wide release. I live in small town Idaho. I don't think this movie is going to do well in this area, and I'll be honest. I went to a little bit later showing, and it had four people in the movie theater, and it was definitely in the main theater, probably one of the bigger theaters this my local movie theater has. And I was surprised it was only four, but then again, I went at 9:35. It was a late night showing. This isn't a typical blockbuster style movie. It's interesting to see how this will do over the next couple days. But just starting out, opening thoughts going in is, this has a lot of positive traction coming from Hollywood, New York, a lot of those limited release areas as a best picture contender. Um, it's going to sit well with those people because it has, it's going to have great acting. Going in, I expected the great acting. I expected a good story. Man, why can't I ever do one of these videos without something like that popping up? Anywho, uh, sidetracked. Um, my opening thoughts are: it was a well acted movie, top to bottom. It was just a good overall movie. Definitely, probably one of the better just put together movies of the year. Um, I don't think it should be an Oscar contention for winning. It'll get a nod, and personally, if it's winning, I think it's trying to send a political message more than the actual movie itself. Shape of Water is definitely one I put above this. Three Billboards is another one I would put above this. So I just don't think The Post is that good of that high quality of a movie, but it was still a fun movie overall. And kind of going into more here, you know, Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks gave two great performances. I felt that Tom Hanks's character was a lot more well written as as the head of the Washington Post. He kind of had a nice, clear, easy kind of path to follow. Where Meryl Streep plays the owner of the Washington Post, who, this is in the early 1970s. She's in charge because her husband committed suicide. I don't want to spoil anything. I don't think that's gonna be a spoiler, but her journey through the movie is fighting on whether or not what she wants to do as a person in power, and I think she does a good job with what they gave her. I think it was a very underwritten role, and I think that it was something that I wasn't compelled as much as I should have been. Um, but these two are top notch actors. They're probably gonna get nominations for this movie. Um, I don't know if they should get nominations. I mean, they're acting. It's hard to tell. Their acting is so good at this point that when I'm watching the movie, I'm just like, oh yeah, it's Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks. Like that's just who they are as people. They're just acting on a movie. And that's not a bad thing. They did well in this movie. It's no different than when you like in Jumanji, The Rock was The Rock, Kevin Hart was Kevin Hart. These guys are just really great actors and in their roles. I just didn't feel moved at any point in this movie, especially with Streep. She wasn't written in a way to be very moving to me personally. I felt like she was very underwritten, and there was a lot more chance for her to have a more powerful impact, but it didn't happen, and that's okay. That kind of goes into my next part. Is the story is about the Pentagon Papers, and this is gonna be maybe spoiler territory. So if you're happy with my opening thoughts, that's fine. Watch the movie, come back, talk about the story. No problems at all. That from here on out, you might get spoilers. It's tough because when you have history like this, it's kind of like, can you spoil history lessons that you probably had in your history class growing up? But it definitely delved more around the post instead of the papers itself. For better or for worse. there was definitely an interesting fall line with the Post and Meryl Streep's character that I just don't think was written well enough. Um, and in all honesty, I personally felt that I would have loved to see the story of the Pentagon Papers happen throughout multiple like newspaper chains and see how they all like rest with it. It wasn't just the New York Times. It just wasn't the Washington Post. Those were two of the main ones. But there are other newspapers and coming together. I would have loved to see a press versus with the Pentagon Papers and not just something that's as simple as just this very sheltered story about this one paper. That's my personal opinion. You know, we didn't get as much knowledge about the history of Vietnam and why the Pentagon Papers were important and stuff like that. We got kind of a story about what was going on with the Washington Post and should they or should they not print these papers, and unfortunately the consequences that came from this kind of went through really quick, and if you blinked you went from the grave decision, should we print these papers, to whatever the consequences would be. Like, it literally happened if you blinked your eye in the movie. Um, and that's, to me, is a little bit detrimental. I would have liked to see that play out more a little bit too. Maybe a little more like in certain areas with certain things. Now, a lot of people are going to go in thinking, is this a political message movie? Both Streep and Hanks are definitely known out there to be a very anti Donald Trump type figure. And a lot of people, especially people who are Republicans that are kind of tired of Hollywood, might not go see this movie because they feel it's a political message movie. The movie itself is not political message at all. I think it's telling the story more of the Washington Post and what they were dealing with at that time than the actual Pentagon Papers and how the press needs to be there to to verify what the news is and what's real and what's being lied about. And honestly, the Pentagon Papers were a huge deal, and I don't think this is they made this movie as a message to Trump. I just think this is a very good story to tell, and I kind of wish they told it in a different angle. But the fact that they just told it within the actual paper itself and what was important going on with the Post, this was not a political message movie. It did very much express freedom of the press, but I don't think that's something that was too political message. I think that's something that everybody generally agrees with in this country nowadays, and I don't think there's an overbearing tone that's saying government is bad. Um, and they do some points in the story like really emphasize that people and the government are real people too. And even though they maybe make decisions that we don't agree with, that doesn't change that they're good people at heart and stuff like things like that. It doesn't make them a terrible person. So I don't think it's a political message movie at all. So if anybody was wondering that question going in, and if they're on the fence because they don't want to be in the middle of a political message movie, that was not the Post at all. Now, the ending felt almost Marvel movie like. It kind of had a nice ending, like yes, whatever, the history, the way history ended it, and awesome, awesome. And then they kind of send off with like a, hey, we're gonna make the Post too, and um, that's not a spoiler alert. Like, that'd be something you see during the movie, and I don't think that's gonna spoil anything that happens in this movie. It's just gonna be you're gonna be left with the. I don't know if I needed that ending to the movie. I particularly didn't like it. I thought that this could have just been a nice, solid, just ending on the message. And if you want to do another movie after this about a different subject that dealt with the press at that time, awesome. You could have totally had a trailer do exactly what the end of this movie did. We didn't need that kind of Marvel wink, wink, hint, hint type thing. Who knows? Maybe they're gonna make a post cinematic universe. I doubt it, but it felt very much like that. It just was. You couldn't just leave it just be the complete movie. You had to try and be like, hey, something else is gonna happen. Uh, and it's history. I mean, it's when you see it, like, of course that's gonna happen next. But personally, I just didn't like that. It didn't need to be the ending. If you wanted to make another movie off of this, you didn't have to include it onto this movie at all. Uh, that's just my personal take. Um, other people may disagree. I just really would have liked the ending of just how history wrote it and how the newspapers went in court against the government and who won and who lost. I'm not gonna tell you who won and who lost. That's history. But I would have liked it to end on that type of note and not this kind of foreshadowing note onto what could come next. Um, which is why overall, like I think the Oscar chances for this movie are low. This is not going to be your best picture. I don't think there's anybody who should win a best actor, actress, or best supporting actor, best supporting actress in this movie. It was overall well done and well made. Spielberg was good, but there's not the direction wasn't clear in some ways. This was a movie that almost like was trying to be a blockbuster but also be an Oscar movie, and I think there's a lot better things out there right now that I really recommend people go and see, like Lady Bird, Shape of Water, you know, Three Billboards. I can't wait to be able to see I, Tonya. I'm gonna go see The Darkest Hour this weekend. And I think there's gonna be a lot more buzz for movies like that. I think this is a very good movie, very 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 good movie, but I don't think this really deserves what I consider an Oscar caliber movie. Which kind of brings me to my final score of being 8 out of 10, and that's fine. I enjoyed the movie. It was very solid. I was happy there was no political message driven through there. Um, I'm interested in in the characters. I would a lot of I'll be honest, the Streep and Tanks characters I was less attached to in terms of I really enjoyed all of the characters around them, involving the post and everything, from the potential bankers to the people who work there to the interns. I enjoyed that a whole bunch, and Streep and Hanks just delivered great performances. And this, I just feel this movie was enjoyable. But it couldn't break out of that 8 out of 10 for me. It couldn't break into the nines like it could have, and I enjoy that. And it was a really good movie, and I recommend everybody should go and see this. It might be one you want to wait for DVD if you're not a big movie theater person, because I don't. I think the movies if going to a theater always adds something, but this is not going to be one of the movies that adds it in the theater. This is something you're going to enjoy just as much as home as I think you're going to enjoy in the theater. So I would definitely hold back the theater recommendation, but I still think it's a great movie. And if you're on the fence about it and you're worried that there's going to be a political message movie, it wasn't. Go and see it. Go and enjoy it. It's going to be one that I think that everybody looking back is going to be happy they saw. Which is good. I'm tougher on this movie because I felt like it had a lot more reasons to be tougher on it. That 8 out of 10 just shows, even though I'm nitpicking on all these little things, it was a really solid movie all about, and I really enjoyed it. So as always, if you do catch this video, feel free to comment, give your thoughts. I always like discussing these things. Nobody is ever wrong in their opinion. If you thought this movie was trash, that's fine. If you thought this movie was the best movie ever, that's fine too. The point of watching movies is to get something out of it, and and that's what nobody can be wrong with their own opinion. So feel free to put a comment down there if you want to like it, share, if you want to subscribe, and if you do like my reviews, if you see any, I have a couple others out right now for The Greatest Showman and Jumanji. It doesn't matter. I'm doing these things for fun. I like talking about movies. So going to see a movie, coming home, and making these videos is kind of a nice way for me to kind of just talk about the movie and put my thoughts out there. And, I enjoy that. It's something that I enjoy. It's easy for me to do. And I recommend, I just recommend that, at some point in the next year, just watch this movie. It's a good movie to watch. And I don't think you'll be disappointed. So I hope everybody has a good weekend, and then I'll see you next with The Darkest Hour.